Ghastly Garlic Episode 26. The Cursed Oxtail Soup, a haunting tale from Hong Kong's most haunted dormitory. Chapter 1, The Oxtail Soup. The oppressive humidity of a Hong Kong summer clung to every corner of the old dormitory, making the air thick and almost tangible. The dormitory, tucked away in a forgotten part of a renowned university, had long since fallen out of favor with the new generation of students. Its hallways were narrow and dimly lit, the paint peeling in long strips from the walls. The residents were a mix of those who couldn't afford the newer accommodations and those who had a taste for the macabre. Ying, a diligent student with a penchant for folklore, had recently moved in. She was drawn to the dormitory not by necessity, but by a sense of morbid curiosity. Her small room on the first floor was sparsely furnished, a bed, a desk cluttered with books, and a small window that barely let in any light. The window, however, offered a view of the building's central courtyard, a place that seemed to echo with the whispers of the past. Ying had heard the stories, everyone had. They were whispered in hushed tones among the students, each retelling more embellished than the last. The most famous of these tales was that of the oxtail soup. It was said that many years ago, a male student named Ming lived on the first floor, while his girlfriend, Li, resided on the floor above. Li, wanting to support Ming during his arduous studies, would lower a bowl of homemade oxtail soup from her window to his. But their relationship soured after a heated argument, and Ming began to ignore Li's attempts at reconciliation. One evening, after weeks of silence, Ming saw the familiar bowl of soup outside his window once more. Driven by curiosity, he pulled it up, only to find Li's severed head inside. Overcome with grief, Li had taken her own life, leaving behind a legacy of horror. Ying dismissed the tale as mere folklore, a ghost story designed to scare the gullible. Yet, as she unpacked her belongings, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. Chapter 2, Unsettling Beginnings. The first few weeks in the dormitory were uneventful. Ying threw herself into her studies, often staying up late into the night. She became accustomed to the sounds of the old building, the creaks and groans, the occasional scurrying of rats in the walls. But there were other sounds, too, sounds she couldn't explain. Whispered voices that seemed to come from nowhere, footsteps echoing in empty hallways, and a faint, persistent tapping on her window at night. One evening, as she was poring over her textbooks, Ying heard a soft knock on her door. She opened it to find her neighbor, Wei, standing in the hallway. Wei was a quiet, reserved student who had lived in the dormitory for over a year. "Hey, Ying," Wei began, shifting uncomfortably. "I wanted to warn you about something. Have you heard about the oxtail soup story?" Ying nodded, curiosity piqued. "Yeah, but I don't believe in ghost stories." Wei glanced around nervously before stepping closer. "I didn't either. Until I started experiencing things. Weird things. It always starts with the soup. If you ever see a bowl of soup outside your window, don't take it. No matter what." Ying raised an eyebrow, skepticism evident. "You've seen it." Wei's face paled. "I've heard it. Late at night, when everything is quiet. The sound of something being lowered, and then tapping on the window. It's happened to a few people here. Most of them leave after the first night. Some don't get the chance." Ying felt a chill run down her spine. She tried to laugh it off, but the seriousness in Wei's eyes made her pause. "Thanks for the warning," she said, closing the door. That night, as Ying lay in bed, she couldn't shake the feeling of unease. She drifted off to sleep, only to be awakened by a soft, rhythmic tapping on her window. Her heart pounded in her chest as she sat up, staring at the shadowy outline of the window. Slowly, she approached and drew back the curtain. There, hanging just outside, was a bowl of soup, swaying gently in the night breeze. Chapter 3, The Unseen Presence. Ying's breath caught in her throat. The bowl of soup hung there, an eerie testament to the tales she had heard. She hesitated, her curiosity warring with the fear Wei's warning had instilled in her. Against her better judgment, she reached out and pulled the bowl inside. The soup looked normal, rich, hearty, and still warm. But Ying couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. She placed the bowl on her desk and backed away, her eyes never leaving it. Hours passed, and the bowl remained untouched. Ying couldn't bring herself to eat it, the fear gnawing at her. She eventually fell into a fitful sleep, only to be awakened by a sharp, agonizing scream that echoed through the dormitory. She bolted upright, her heart racing. The scream had come from above, from the floor where Lee had once lived. Ying rushed out of her room, joining the other frightened students in the hallway. They exchanged nervous glances, unsure of what to do. Did anyone else hear that? One student whispered. It came from upstairs, another replied, her voice trembling. Wei appeared, his face pale and drawn. It's happening again, he muttered, mostly to himself. Just like before. The group hesitated for a moment before a few brave souls, including Ying, decided to investigate. They ascended the creaky stairs, each step echoing ominously in the silence. When they reached the door to the room directly above Ying's, they found it ajar. Inside, the room was in disarray. Furniture was overturned, and papers were scattered everywhere. But the most disturbing sight was the window, wide open with a rope hanging from it, leading to the courtyard below. A bowl, identical to the one in Ying's room, lay shattered on the floor, its contents splattered across the wooden boards. What happened here? Someone whispered. Wei shook his head. I don't know, but we need to get out of here. Now? The group quickly retreated, a sense of dread hanging over them. Back in her room, Ying stared at the untouched bowl of soup on her desk. She knew she had to get rid of it, but the thought of touching it filled her with an inexplicable terror. That night, the tapping on her window returned, but this time, it was accompanied by something else. A soft, mournful wail that seemed to seep into her very soul. Ying pressed her hands over her ears, trying to block out the sound, but it was no use. The wailing grew louder, more insistent, until it was all she could hear. Chapter 4, Descent into Madness. Ying's nights became a torment of ghostly sounds and eerie visions. The tapping on her window never ceased, and the wailing grew more desperate with each passing day. She began to see shadows moving in the corners of her room, flickering just beyond her line of sight. Her once rational mind started to unravel, frayed by the relentless assault of the supernatural. Her studies suffered, her grades plummeted, and she found herself isolated from her friends. They avoided her, whispering about her erratic behavior and the haunted dormitory. Only Wei remained by her side, sharing in her torment. We need to find out what's causing this, Wei said one evening, his voice tinged with desperation. There has to be a reason behind the legend. Together, they delved into the history of the dormitory and the tragic tale of Ming and Li. They pored over old records, newspaper clippings, and any information they could find. What they uncovered was a story of love, betrayal, and unfulfilled promises. Li had been deeply in love with Ming, but their relationship had been tumultuous. The argument that led to their estrangement was over a secret Ming had kept, a secret that, when revealed, shattered Li's heart. In her grief, she had taken her own life, leaving behind a curse that lingered in the dormitory. We have to break the curse, Wei insisted. It's the only way to stop this. But Ying was losing hope. The nights were getting worse, the wailing more unbearable. She could feel her sanity slipping away, pulled into the same despair that had consumed Li. Chapter 5, The Final Confrontation. One stormy night, as the rain battered against the windows, Ying reached her breaking point. The wailing was louder than ever, a relentless cry that echoed through her very being. Desperate for answers, she confronted the bowl of soup on her desk, now cold and congealed. Why won't you leave me alone? She screamed, her voice cracking with anguish. What do you want from me? In response, the room seemed to grow colder, the shadows lengthening and closing in. Ying could feel a presence, Li's presence, her sorrow and rage permeating the air. She knew what she had to do. With trembling hands, Ying lifted the bowl and carried it to the window. She opened it and looked out into the stormy night. I'm sorry, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. I'm so sorry for what happened to you. She tipped the bowl, letting the contents spill out into the darkness below. The wailing ceased abruptly, replaced by a profound silence. Ying felt a weight lift from her shoulders, as if Li's spirit had finally found some semblance of peace. For the first time in weeks, Ying felt a glimmer of hope that the nightmare might be over. She slept deeply that night, undisturbed by the usual sounds that had plagued her. The next morning, she awoke to a quiet dormitory, the oppressive atmosphere seemingly lifted. The other students noticed the change too, whispering that the curse had been broken. But Ying knew better. She knew that such curses didn't just end, they shifted, waiting for another moment to strike. She tried to focus on her studies, returning to a semblance of normalcy. Yet, a lingering sense of unease stayed with her, a reminder of the darkness she had faced. Chapter 6: Unearthing Deeper Secrets. Weeks passed, and Ying slowly regained her footing. Her grades improved, and she started reconnecting with her friends. Wei, however, remained troubled. He spent hours in the library, searching for more information about the dormitory's dark history. One evening, he approached Ying with a stack of old documents. "I found something," he said, his voice tinged with excitement and fear. "There's more to the story of Ming and Li." Ying leaned in, intrigued. "What do you mean?" Wei spread out the documents on her desk. There was another student, a girl named Mai. She lived in the dormitory years before Ming and Li. She also died under mysterious circumstances. Ying felt a chill run down her spine. Another death. How is it connected? Wei pointed to an old photograph of Mai, her eyes hauntingly familiar. According to these records, Mai was known for making oxtail soup. She used to share it with her friends, just like Li did with Ming. Ying's heart sank. "You think Mai's spirit might be involved?" Wei nodded. "It's possible that Mai's unresolved death started the curse, and it continued with Li's tragedy. We need to find out what happened to Mai if we are going to end this for good." Driven by a renewed sense of purpose, Ying and Wei delved deeper into Mai's history. They discovered that Mai had been a talented student with a bright future. However, her life was cut short by a tragic accident, or so it was recorded. The details were vague, and the more they uncovered, the more it seemed like Mai's death had been anything but accidental. Chapter 7: The Ritual. Determined to uncover the truth, Ying and Wei sought out Mai's surviving relatives and former classmates. They pieced together a story of jealousy and betrayal. Mai had been involved in a love triangle that ended in heartbreak and her untimely death. The jealousy and anger surrounding her demise had left a lingering curse on the dormitory. "We need to perform a ritual to release Mai's spirit," Wei suggested one evening, after poring over old texts and speaking to local spiritualists. "We need to help her find peace." Ying was hesitant, but knew it was their only option. They gathered the necessary items: incense, candles, and offerings of food, including oxtail soup. The ritual was to be performed in Mai's old room, which had been left unoccupied for years. As they entered the dusty, abandoned room, a sense of dread washed over them. They set up the altar and began the ritual, chanting prayers and lighting the incense. The air grew thick with tension, and shadows danced on the walls. "Mai, if you're here, we are sorry for what happened to you," Wei intoned, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. "We want to help you find peace." For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a cold breeze swept through the room, extinguishing the candles. The shadows seemed to converge, forming the outline of a young woman. Mai's spirit hovered before them, her eyes filled with sorrow and longing. Ying stepped forward, holding out the bowl of oxtail soup. "Please, take this offering and find peace." The spirit reached out, her translucent fingers brushing against the bowl. A tear slid down her ghostly cheek, and she slowly faded, her form dissolving into the air. The room grew warmer, the oppressive atmosphere lifting. Chapter 8: The Unending Curse. The ritual seemed to work. The dormitory returned to its quiet, mundane existence. Students laughed and stuttered, the oppressive weight of the curse lifted. Ying and Wei felt a sense of accomplishment, believing they had finally put an end to the hauntings. But one night, as Ying lay in bed, she heard a familiar sound, the soft, rhythmic tapping on her window. Her heart sank as she pulled back the curtain, revealing a bowl of oxtail soup hanging just outside. Despair washed over her. The curse had not been broken. It had only been appeased temporarily. The spirits of Mai and Li were still bound to the dormitory, their unresolved pain echoing through the halls. Ying knew that the cycle would continue, drawing in new victims, feeding off their fear and despair. The dormitory would forever be a place of tragedy and loss, its dark history repeating itself endlessly. She sat on her bed, tears streaming down her face, as the tapping continued. The bowl swayed in the night breeze, a chilling reminder that some curses could never be truly broken. And so, the tale of the oxtail soup endured, a haunting legend whispered among the students of the old dormitory. Ying's story became part of the folklore, a cautionary tale for those who dared to seek the truth behind the eerie, supernatural events. In the end, the dormitory remained a place of fear and mystery, its walls echoing with the cries of the past, leaving those who encountered it forever haunted by the ghosts of the oxtail soup. The end.
Thanks for tuning in to our podcast. If you enjoyed our exploration of ghosts, mythical creatures, and urban legends, please share it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe for more thrilling episodes. Until next time, my beloved listeners.